Ladies and gentlemen, good day. The title of my paper is Some Identified Issues in the Translations of English to Hausa in Some Media Houses. Language is a means through which human beings communicate, express their thoughts, ideas, and feelings. The most important among functions of language is communication among human beings. Effective communication takes place only if users of a particular language make appropriate use of that language. Hence, language structures, contexts, and norms are needed to express new ideas to facilitate effective communication. One of the means through which this can be achieved is translation of a spoken or written text into another language. Translation is a very common means of interpreting message encoded in one language into another language for the purpose of delivering a message to people who do not understand the language in which the translation is a very common means of interpreting message encoded in one language into another language for the purpose of delivering a message to people who do not understand the language in which the message is originally encoded. Thus, translation has been in use for a very long time by rulers, educators, traders, conquerors, religious missionaries, and so on for their own purposes. In Nigeria, English has been the official language, while while there are other dominant languages. Hausa is one of the uh, major dominant languages in Nigeria. Uh, Hausa is not only a dominant language in Nigeria, but it is also used as a means of communication among many people across West Africa. Thus, it is highly recognized in the world. It is one of the languages in which prominent media, transnational media, broadcast their own programs. These media include BBC, Voice of America, Deutsche Welle, RFI, Radio Beijing, and so on. Undoubtedly, most of the news and current affairs programs produced in Hausa are translated versions of the English texts. Admittedly, the translated versions are full of issues of concern, relation, or related to quality of translation. In translation, concepts need not to be directly translated. The ideas or concepts in any text to be translated need to be interpreted and put in a way that even a person who does not understand the source language can receive the message as it is in the target language. Instead, the kind of translation that proliferates these days does not exactly convey the content of the original text in the source language. Of course, one may not be wrong to say that it often leads to confusion, as sometimes polysemous words or phrases are translated not as used in the context of the original text. For example, the author one day noticed that the word check, whose context in the original text in the source language suggests that its meaning is to control, but it was translated as bincika, meaning to find out, which is another meaning of the word, but not in that context. This typically indicates that the translator might not have been aware that translation is also guided by a context, culture, and structure of the target language. According to Mohammed 2008a, translation is the process of reproducing the nearest equivalent of meaning and style in the receptor language as naturally as possible, like presented in the source language. Now, several authors have written about translation from one language to another. For example, in his article, for example, in his article on the use of Hausa in electronic media, Mohammed points out that translating news and feature programs originally written in English to Hausa to enable many mass media to reach wider audience and hence achieve their objectives. Mohammed advises that language board or committees be established, which is to be saddled with the responsibility of enriching and developing languages like Hausa for harmonization and standardization of new terms and concepts for use in mass media. He is of the view that what is now expected of mass communication scholars is identification and selection of language of wider mass communication range within a particular area, and the enrichment and the expansion of the identified selected language to incorporate unfamiliar English concepts and the ideas to the speakers of that language, such as scientific and technical terms, most of which emanate from English. Mohammed also reports Fitch and Rasco as saying translation has to conform to a particular guidelines which are as follows: universality, B. Monosemy. This means that only a single item is required as a rendition of a concept. Then intelligibility, which means that a translated text must be clear, meaningful, and understandable. Then D. Correctness, which means that a term or concept must be correctly rendered in such a way that the translated text typically represents the referent. E. Availability, which means that a referent must be rendered in its current form. F. Adequacy, which means that a rendition must adequately and satisfactorily uh, be referred to accurately. Now, the methodology employed by this our research is that it employs qualitative approach to investigate and describe how some concepts in English are translated into Hausa in the media houses. In fact, 40 English expressions and terms which seems to be directly translated to Hausa without due consideration of guiding principles of translation have been selected purposefully, and they have been selected through inspection because the researcher or the writer is native Hausa speaker. Our data has been presented in table, and the table has 3 columns or 4 columns. The first column is the serial number, then the second column is the English version of the English version or the source. Then the second column or the third column is the rendition as usually rendered by the media houses. Then the fourth column is the existing Hausa version, which ought to be the correct rendition. In our analysis, what we have noticed is that most of the expressions in which take are used or take is used, the word take, there are a lot of phrasal verbs or other phrases in which take is used. The take itself is now rendered directly as it is take, meaning dauka in Hausa, but irrespective of the context. Take, for example, we have take drug, meaning, you see, shan magani in Hausa, but it is commonly rendered as daukar magani instead of shan magani, and it is now becoming the norm. Or another example is taking law into hands. In Hausa, what we have is the equivalent of this in Hausa is yanke makai hukunci, but in English, as it is, the current rendition is directly translation of the English version, which means daukar doka a hannu. There is no this concept in Hausa, taking law into hand, but yanke makai hukunci, meaning judging for yourself, to make it or to pass judgment on your behalf. See, another example is to sleep with one eye or 2 eyes closed or open. Now this is usually directly rendered as yin bacci da ido biyu. This is just direct translation. Or da ido biyu a rufe, or da ido daya a rufe, or bude. But in Hausa, what we have is bacci da suleba. But these type of renditions are now becoming the norm. They are taking over. They are the most popularly now used. Now, eventually, uh, they are taking over, and in a similar vein, the English word looting is always translated as kwasar ganima. What to note here is that the concept of looting in English has negative connotation, whereas the concept of kwasar ganima in Hausa has positive connotation. Usually it is after winning a battle that ganima is applicable. Ganima. Even in Islam, ganima is not forbidden, but looting is forbidden. And Hausa culture is mostly, you see, very close to Islamic. It's inseparable, in fact, from Islamic culture. It must not be forgotten that Hausa language, uh, uh, modern Hausa language or modern Hausa has been greatly influenced by Islam. In this regard, the most appropriate rendition of looting is wasoso. Wasoso has negative connotation, while ganima has positive connotation. And looting has negative connotation. See, ganima is more of booty. Wasoso, looting is more of wasoso in Hausa. See, then another example is, see, family, which is, especially when it is used in a phrase like family of the deceased, the word is translated as iyali or iyali without consideration of the concept of the family in English and Hausa. In Hausa, in English, one can own a family just by being a member of the family, even if he is not the head of the family. But in Hausa, you only own a family when you are a member, when you are the head of that family. But you don't own the family if you are not a member of it. But it is directly translated as iyalansa, even if he is not the head of that family, which is not in conformity with Hausa culture. In conclusion, renditions like this are now becoming most popularly used. Renditions like this are now becoming more and more popularly used by not only youth who are known to be vanguards of language change, but also among the elderly people. And this is an indication that language change, this is the beginning of change or another change or process of change in Hausa language. Thank you.